The house stood on a quiet hill, far from the noise of the city. From the outside, it looked calm and perfect, like nothing bad could ever happen inside. Tall gates, clean white walls, and large glass windows showed wealth and success. Many people dreamed of living in a place like this. They believed the man who owned it had the perfect life. He was a billionaire, known for building his success from nothing. People admired him. Business magazines wrote about his sharp mind and kind heart. He often spoke about values, family, and respect. Cameras loved him. Crowds applauded him. To the world, he was a good man who had made it in life. Inside the house lived his mother. She was old now, her body weak, her steps slow. Age had taken her strength, but not her kindness. She spent most of her time in a quiet room at the back of the house, close to the garden. She liked watching birds and listening to the wind move through the trees. She did not ask for much, just peace, respect, and a little love from her son. She remembered the days when they had nothing. She remembered skipping meals so her son could eat. She remembered working long hours, cleaning other people's houses, dreaming that one day her child would not suffer like she did. Those memories lived deep in her heart, even if she never spoke of them. Now her son was rich, powerful, and busy. He loved his mother, but his life moved fast. Meetings, flights, calls, and plans filled his days. He believed his mother was safe in his home. He believed the people around her were kind. He never imagined otherwise. The woman he planned to marry had moved into the house months earlier. She was beautiful, well-dressed, and always smiling in public. She knew how to speak softly in front of guests and laugh at the right moments. People said she was perfect for him. Elegant, confident, and from a good background. Together they looked like a dream couple. But dreams can hide dark corners. The next morning, the house felt heavier than usual. The sunlight came through the tall windows, but it didn't warm the rooms. The billionaire had left early, as he always did, rushing to meetings and phone calls that never seemed to end. The fiancée moved about the house with a quiet confidence, pretending everything was fine, while the mother sat in her chair near the window, pretending she didn't feel the tension thickening around her. The maid was already busy, carrying laundry and sweeping floors, her eyes always flicking toward the corners of the rooms where she knew the fiancé might appear. She had learned over the months to anticipate the woman's moods. A cold stare from her meant a long morning of silent tension. A quiet sigh could turn into a day of complaints. The mother, fragile and old, bore the brunt of it, but the maid noticed everything Dotted started with small things. The fiancé would question why the mother took so long to finish a simple task. "Why are you sitting there again?" she asked one morning as the mother tried to fold a small towel. Her voice was soft, almost polite, but her tone carried something sharp, like a blade hidden under silk. "I just wanted to rest," the mother said quietly, her hand shaking slightly. "Rest?" The fiancé's laugh was soft but cruel. "You rest too much. You rest the morning." The house felt different the next morning. Light streamed through the windows, but it was not just sunlight that warmed the rooms. There was a new energy, a quiet shift that everyone could feel. The billionaire had witnessed the cruelty the day before. He had seen the fear in his mother's eyes and the lies behind the fiancé's sweet words. And yet the storm was not over. The fiancée had not left. She still lingered, still tried to act as if nothing had happened. But now she knew her control was gone. The mother sat in her chair, hands folded, her eyes tired but calm. She had survived the confrontation the day before, and though fear still lingered, there was a sense of relief too. The fiancée could no longer hide her cruelty from the person who mattered most. The billionaire had seen the truth, and the fiancée knew she could not manipulate him anymore. The maid, standing quietly in the hallway, felt a surge of determination. The truth had been revealed, but that was only the beginning. Seeing the fiancée exposed had shifted the power in the house, and now it was time to act. She had watched, waited, and learned, and she knew that words alone would not stop the fiancé from causing harm if she was allowed to stay. The fiancé moved through the house that morning, her face carefully polite, her smile fixed. But the maid noticed the subtle sharpness in her eyes, the way her hands flexed slightly when no one was looking. She had not given up, not entirely, and she still hoped to control the narrative. The maid's heart tightened, knowing that the woman could still find ways to hurt the mother if left unchecked. The maid approached the billionaire quietly. "Sir," she said softly, careful not to startle him, "I think we need to act carefully." She may try to regain control, to manipulate the situation again. The billionaire looked at her with gratitude. "I know," he said, his voice firm. "I saw everything yesterday. I will not allow her to hurt my mother again. But what do you suggest?" The maid's eyes were steady. "We need to make sure she cannot continue. Words are no longer enough. We need to set clear boundaries, and I will help you do it." The billionaire nodded. He trusted her. He had seen her courage, her honesty, and the way she had quietly protected his mother for months. Now, she would help him take action. The fiancé was in the living room, pretending to read a magazine, but the billionaire walked in with the maid by his side. His presence was calm, but the weight of authority in the room was undeniable. The fiancé looked up, smiling, but it was forced, hollow. "Good morning," she said softly. "I thought I would organize some things while you were away." The billionaire's eyes were steady. "We need to talk," he said firmly, "about how you have treated my mother." The fiancé's smile faltered. "I don't understand. I was only trying to help." The billionaire shook his head. "No, I saw what happened. I know what you said and what you did. It ends now." The fiancé's lips pressed together, and she looked around, realizing she had no ally in the room. The maid stepped closer to the mother, standing as a quiet shield. Her presence was calm, but it was clear. She would not allow any further cruelty. "I have seen everything," the maid said softly, her voice steady. "I have watched her hurt you for months, and I cannot allow it to continue. The truth has been revealed, and it is time for consequences." The fiancé's eyes narrowed. She had expected fear, submission, perhaps silence. But what she saw instead was courage, quiet, unwavering courage that filled the room like a wall. She realized she had underestimated them. She realized she had lost control. The billionaire spoke again, his voice firm and decisive. "You will leave this house, immediately. You will not harm my mother again. And you will not return." The fiancée opened her mouth, trying to find words, but the strength in his voice, the determination in the maid's eyes, and the calm dignity of his mother left her silent. She had been unmasked, exposed, and now she had nowhere to turn. The mother looked at the maid, her eyes filled with gratitude. She had endured so much, and now she could finally breathe. The maid had risked everything to protect her, to stand up for her when no one else would. And the fiancé, who had once seemed untouchable, was finally powerless. The fiancée left the house that morning, carrying with her the weight of her actions. She had tried to control, manipulate, and harm, but she had not counted on courage, honesty, and loyalty. The house was quiet again, but this time it was a calm, healing quiet. The billionaire turned to his mother, holding her hand gently. "I should have seen this sooner," he said softly. "I should have protected you. But I promise, I will never let anyone treat you this way again." The mother smiled weakly, tears in her eyes. "It's not your fault," she whispered. I just wanted to protect you. I didn't want you to see the cruelty, to worry." "You don't have to protect me anymore," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "You deserve respect, love, and peace, and I will make sure you get it." The maid stayed quietly nearby, watching the scene unfold. She had done what she could, speaking the truth and standing up when it mattered most. Her presence had changed the course of the morning, and the mother's relief was a quiet reward. In the days that followed, the mansion slowly returned to its natural rhythm. The fear and tension that had lingered for months began to fade. The mother regained her confidence and began moving through the house with ease, supported and cared for. She no longer flinched at harsh words or sudden movements. She had allies now, people who would not allow cruelty to continue. The billionaire spent more time at home, focused on rebuilding the trust and peace that had been shaken. He listened to his mother, cared for her needs, and made her feel valued and safe. The maid continued her work, quietly protective, always ready to act if needed, but now free from the constant shadow of fear. Together, they formed a new rhythm in the house. The mother's health improved, her spirit strengthened. She laughed more freely, spoke with confidence, and moved through her home with dignity. The billionaire learned a valuable lesson about trust, vigilance, and the courage it takes to confront cruelty, no matter who wields it. The maid, once invisible, became a quiet hero in the eyes of the family. Her courage and integrity had changed everything. She had spoken the truth, protected the vulnerable, and ensured that justice was done. The mother's safety and peace were her reward, and the gratitude in their eyes was worth more than any praise or recognition. One evening, as the sun set and the house glowed with warm light, the three of them sat together in the living room. The mother held her son's hand. The billionaire smiled at both of them, and the maid, standing nearby, felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. The house was no longer a place of fear. It was a place of healing, respect, and love. The mother spoke softly, her voice full of gratitude. "I never thought I could feel this safe again. Thank you, both of you." The billionaire squeezed her hand gently. "You are my mother. You deserve nothing less than the best." The maid smiled, feeling a deep warmth in her chest. "You're safe now. That's what matters." The fiancée was gone, her influence erased, and the house had returned to a place of peace. But more than that, the bonds between the mother, the son, and the maid had grown stronger. Trust, courage, and honesty had triumphed over cruelty. And for the first time in a long time, everyone felt hope. The house was quiet that night, the lights soft, the rooms calm. And as the mother drifted into sleep, the billionaire by her side, and the maid watching over them both, they all knew something important. Courage, integrity, and love could change lives. The fiancé had been unmasked. The truth had been revealed. And the maid, who had done the unthinkable, had ensured that justice and peace finally returned to the house. It was the beginning of a new chapter. One where kindness, bravery, and care would always have a place, and cruelty would never again find a home within those walls. Started quietly, almost too quietly. The sun filtered through the tall windows of the mansion, painting the floors in soft gold. The morning sun poured into the mansion, glinting off the polished floors and crystal windows. Everything looked perfect from the outside, the way it always did. But inside, tension filled the air, thick and heavy, almost like a storm waiting to break. The billionaire had spent the night traveling and was returning home earlier than usual, his meetings having ended faster than expected. The mother sat in her usual chair, her hands folded in her lap. She was quiet, trying not to think about the fiancé, who had been even sharper over the last few days. The fiancé had found new ways to belittle her, controlling every movement, questioning every choice, and finding fault in everything she did. The mother had learned to sit quietly, to endure, and to pray that the billionaire never found out. The maid was in the hallway, quietly sweeping, listening to the faint sounds of the fiancé moving around upstairs. Her eyes flicked toward the mother every few seconds, making sure she was safe. She could feel that today something might change. She didn't know what, but the tension in the house had grown almost unbearable. Suddenly, the sound of the front door opening echoed through the mansion. The billionaire was home earlier than expected. He had taken off his coat and shoes quickly, smiling as he called out, expecting the calm and warmth that his home usually provided. But something was different today. The air felt heavier, and the silence that followed his greeting felt wrong. The fiancée came down the stairs, all smiles and carefully polite words. "Welcome home," she said, her voice soft and sweet. Her eyes flicked toward the mother and then to the maid. There was something in her posture, a sense of control that seemed rehearsed. The billionaire smiled, taking off his watch. "It's good to be home earlier than expected," he said. "How has everyone been?" The fiancée spoke first. "Everything has been fine. Mother has been resting a lot, and I've made sure she is comfortable." Her tone was measured, smooth, and confident. The billionaire's eyes softened as they turned to his mother. "Mother, have you been all right?" he asked, his voice warm, full of concern. The mother looked down, hesitant. I'm fine, son," she whispered. She had learned long ago that the truth could make things worse, so she always softened her words when it came to his presence. But today, the billionaire noticed something different. The mother's eyes looked tired, her hand shook slightly, and her posture seemed smaller than usual. Something in her expression did not match the fiancé's smooth assurances. Before he could ask more, the fiancé's sharp words broke the moment. "Mother should be more careful," she said suddenly, loud enough for everyone to hear. "She spills things, she moves too slowly, and she cannot even manage her own little tasks properly." The billionaire froze. He had never heard the fiancé speak to his mother like this before. His eyes widened slightly as he took in the trembling figure of his mother, the way her hands fidgeted nervously in her lap, the way she lowered her head as if expecting punishment. "Excuse me?" he said carefully, stepping closer. His tone was calm, but there was an edge to it, a question hanging in the air. The fiancée smiled, smoothly covering her cruelty with a soft laugh. "I'm just trying to help her improve," she said. "She's been careless, and someone needs to guide her. Don't worry, I'm only doing what's best." But the billionaire saw through her act. He noticed the way she had leaned too close, the sharpness in her tone that she tried to mask, and the way his mother flinched as she spoke. His heart tightened, a knot forming in his chest. Something was wrong. Something serious. He turned to the mother. "Is this true?" he asked, his voice gentle, filled with concern. The mother shook her head quickly. "No, son, But she couldn't finish. The words caught in her throat, and tears welled up in her eyes. She wanted to tell him everything, but fear held her back. She didn't want to hurt him, didn't want to ruin what he believed was perfect. The fiancé noticed the hesitation and tried to intervene. "It's nothing, really," she said quickly. "Just a small misunderstanding. Mother is fine. Everything is under control." But the billionaire's eyes were sharp now. He had been away from the house for months, busy with work and travel. He had trusted everyone to take care of his mother. And now he saw the truth reflected in her hands, in her trembling body, and in her frightened eyes. He stepped closer to his mother, taking her hands gently in his own. "Mother, tell me the truth," he said, his voice firm but kind. "You don't have to hide anything from me." The mother looked at him, her eyes full of fear and love. She wanted to protect him from the ugly reality, but the sight of his face, so full of trust and care, broke her heart. She took a deep breath and whispered, She has not been kind to me. She yells and criticizes. She treats me like I am nothing." The billionaire's jaw tightened. His eyes flicked to the fiancée, who stood frozen for a moment, realizing that her carefully built facade was cracking. She opened her mouth, but no words came. The maid, who had been standing quietly nearby, felt her heart race. This was the moment they had all been waiting for. The truth was finally coming to light. She had seen everything, witnessed every cruel word, every harsh action, and now the billionaire could see it too. The billionaire looked at the fiancée. "Is this true?" he asked, his voice low but firm, like a thunderclap in the quiet room. The fiancée tried to maintain her composure. I was only trying to help," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Her eyes darted to the maid, who met her gaze steadily. The billionaire felt a surge of anger and guilt all at once. He had trusted her, believed her, and now he realized that his mother had been suffering in silence while he focused on everything else. His heart ached at the thought of all the pain his mother had endured, all the days she had endured fear and humiliation while he was away. The mother, tears streaming down her face, reached for his hand. "I didn't want to worry you," she whispered. "I tried to be strong. I couldn't fight her alone." The billionaire pulled her into a gentle embrace, holding her close. "You don't have to fight alone anymore," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "I should have protected you sooner. I promise, I won't let this happen again." The fiancée tried to speak, to defend herself, but the room was heavy with silence. She realized, finally, that her actions had been seen and understood, and there was no way to hide behind charm or politeness anymore. The maid stepped forward, her voice calm but unwavering. "I have seen everything," she said. "I have watched her treat you cruelly every day. You were never alone, but the truth needed to be heard. I cannot allow anyone to hurt you any longer." The billionaire looked at her with a mix of gratitude and awe. He had always trusted his mother, and now he saw the maid's courage and loyalty as a shield he had never known he needed. Her bravery, speaking the truth when so many feared the consequences, changed everything. The fiancée's eyes widened, and she took a step back. She had expected silence, submission, and fear. She had not expected confrontation, not from a maid, and certainly not from a billionaire who had just discovered the truth. The mother, still holding her son's hand, felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She had endured so much, but now the burden of fear and shame began to fade. The fiancée's cruelty was finally exposed, and for the first time in months, she felt safe in her own home. The billionaire turned to the fiancée, his eyes filled with resolve. "You will leave this house," he said firmly. "You have no place here, not after what you have done." The fiancée tried to protest, tried to twist her words into excuses, but the billionaire would not listen. He had seen the truth, and he would not allow anyone to harm the woman who had given him life. The maid stood quietly, watching as justice began to unfold. She had done what she could, and now it was up to the billionaire to act. She had witnessed cruelty and had the courage to speak. The mother had survived, and the fiancé had finally been unmasked. That evening, the mansion felt lighter, almost peaceful for the first time in months. The mother sat in her chair, her hands no longer trembling. The billionaire was at her side, holding her hand, speaking softly to her, promising protection and care. The maid cleaned quietly, but she felt a deep satisfaction. The house, which had been full of fear and tension, was slowly beginning to feel like home again. She knew there would be challenges ahead, but for now, the darkness had been confronted. The fiancée had been seen for who she truly was. The truth had finally reached the man who mattered most. And in the quiet corners of the mansion, hope began to grow again. The storm had arrived, and it had broken the silence that had allowed cruelty to flourish. And as the night fell over the house, everyone knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The billionaire had left for an early meeting, as he always did, and the house seemed to breathe in the silence that followed. But the peace was only on the surface. Tension ran under the walls, thick and heavy. The fiancée moved through the rooms with her usual careful elegance, pretending everything was calm, but her eyes were sharp, scanning for opportunities to assert control. She knew the mother would not complain, that the old woman's voice was too quiet to fight back. She had learned to see weakness and take advantage of it. That morning, she decided to test it. She entered the mother's room without knocking. The old woman looked up from her chair, where she had been sitting quietly, watching the birds in the garden. Her hands were folded in her lap, but her heart was already racing. She knew what was coming. "Why are you sitting there again?" the fiancée asked, her voice soft but pointed. "You're wasting time. You could be doing something useful." The mother lowered her gaze. I was resting," she whispered. The fiancée's lips pressed into a thin line. "Resting? You don't get to rest all the time. This is not your home. You need to contribute, or at least appear capable." The mother's hands trembled. She tried to steady herself, but the words cut deep. She felt small, as if the room had grown taller and the walls closer. She had lived long enough to endure, but the humiliation was still sharp, like fire on cold skin. The maid, standing just inside the doorway, felt a surge of anger. She wanted to speak, to say something loud enough to make the fiancée stop, but she stayed silent. The risk was too high. The fiancée could fire her in an instant, and then the mother would be left completely alone. Instead, the maid stayed close, ready to act if the situation worsened. As if sensing a challenge, the fiancée continued. She leaned slightly forward, pointing at a small stack of papers the mother had placed on the table. "You even do things wrong when you try to help. Why can't you get anything right?" The mother swallowed hard. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Words felt heavy and meaningless. She was too afraid, too tired, too small to fight. The fiancée laughed softly, almost to herself. It was a cruel sound, one that lingered in the room like smoke. "You're so fragile. Do you think people will respect you for being weak?" The mother's eyes filled with tears. She tried to blink them away, but they came anyway. She had spent decades taking care of others, sacrificing herself, working tirelessly so her son could live a better life. And now she was made to feel useless in her own home. The maid stepped forward, placing a hand gently on the mother's arm. "It's okay," she whispered. "Don't listen to her. She doesn't understand." The fiancée's gaze flicked to the maid, sharp and calculating. She smiled, but it was the kind of smile that meant trouble. "And what are you? Another servant who thinks she knows better? Don't interfere." The maid held her ground. She did not move her hand, and her voice was quiet but firm. "I only care about her well-being." The fiancée's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing more. Instead, she turned and left the room, her heels clicking on the floor as she went. The door closed, leaving silence behind, heavy and suffocating. The mother sat in her chair, trembling. Her body shook, not from physical exertion, but from the fear and hurt that had built up over the months. She felt helpless, trapped in her own home by someone who had no respect for her life or her sacrifices. The maid knelt beside her, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "Don't cry," she said softly. "She cannot take your dignity from you. She only has the power you allow her to have." The mother shook her head, tears spilling onto her lap. I don't know how much longer I can do this," she whispered. "I want to be strong, but it's so hard." The maid held her hand, her eyes steady and determined. "You're stronger than you think," she said. "I've seen it. And I won't let her hurt you. Not anymore." That day, the fiancée's actions escalated. She began to control even the smallest details of the mother's life: what she ate, when she ate, how she walked, where she sat. Every movement, every gesture was scrutinized. Every mistake, real or imagined, was met with criticism. One afternoon, she demanded that the mother reorganize the pantry, a task that required bending and lifting boxes far heavier than her old body could handle. The mother struggled, her hands trembling, her back aching. The fiancée stood nearby, her arms crossed, watching with a faint, cruel smile. "You're so slow," she said. "I thought you were older and wiser, but you can barely manage this. How do you expect anyone to respect you?" The mother tried to answer, but her voice failed her. She could only drop her gaze to the floor, ashamed and frightened. The maid moved closer, picking up one of the heavier boxes and carrying it to the shelf herself. "Here," she said quietly. "Let me help." The fiancée glanced at her, lips tightening. "I said stand back. She can do this herself." The maid did not move. Her eyes met the fiancée's, steady and calm. She had made a choice long before, a choice that she would not abandon. "She has done enough," she said. "Let me handle the rest." The fiancée's expression darkened, and for a moment, the room was thick with tension. But she finally turned away, muttering under her breath, leaving the maid and the mother alone. The mother leaned heavily on her chair, exhausted. Her body ached, and her heart felt heavier than it had in years. She wanted to cry, but the maid's presence gave her a small measure of comfort. She knew she was not completely alone. That evening, after the fiancée had gone to her room, the maid prepared tea for the mother and sat with her by the window. The birds were quiet, the garden calm, but inside the room, the weight of the day pressed down on them. "You can't let her win," the maid said softly. "You've survived worse than this. You taught a young man how to be good and kind. That counts for more than her words ever will." The mother's lips trembled. I don't know if I can fight back. I feel so small." "You don't have to fight her," the maid replied. "Not yet. You have me. And when the time comes, we'll face this together." The mother looked at her, hope flickering in her eyes for the first time that day. She had felt powerless, but the maid's words reminded her that she still had someone on her side. Someone who cared enough to stand up, even in the face of danger. The days that followed were a mix of tension and careful planning. The fiancée continued her quiet cruelty, testing the mother and observing the maid. But the maid grew more confident. She learned the patterns, the schedules, the moments when the fiancée would be most dangerous. She observed quietly, always protecting the mother, always ready for the moment when she could do more than just watch. One morning, the fiancée demanded that the mother clean the windows of the upper floor. The task was dangerous for someone her age, but the fiancée insisted. The mother's hand shook as she tried to hold the ladder steady. The fiancée watched from below, a cruel smile on her face. The maid stepped forward. "I'll help her," she said calmly. "It's safer if I do this." The fiancée hesitated. For the first time, she saw that the maid would not back down. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Very well," she said finally, but the tone carried a warning. The mother watched, relief washing over her as the maid carefully guided her down from the ladder. For the first time in days, she felt safe, protected. She realized that she did not have to face cruelty alone. That night, the mother lay in her chair, her hands folded. The house was quiet, but she could feel a change in the air. The fiancée's control was slipping, ever so slightly. The maid had grown bolder, and the mother had started to feel that perhaps, just perhaps, she would survive this thought. And in the quiet darkness of the mansion, the maid sat by the fire, planning. She knew the cruelty would not end easily, but she also knew that the more she observed, the more she understood. And understanding was power. Soon, the fiancée's actions would escalate further, and the moment would come when silence was no longer enough. The house seemed peaceful to the outside world, but inside, tension was building. And for the first time, the mother felt a spark of hope. Not because the cruelty had ended, but because she had an ally, a brave, determined ally who refused to let her suffer in silence. The game had changed, lowering everything down. "This is my house now. Try to keep up." The words hurt more than she could explain. The mother looked down, her eyes wet, but she did not speak again. She had learned long ago that fighting back sometimes brought worse trouble. The fiancée smiled to herself, satisfied that she had spoken her version of truth, while the maid's jaw tightened with anger. The maid knew that this was not ordinary impatience. This was deliberate. She had seen the fiancée's eyes when she walked past the mother, the way they sparkled with a strange satisfaction at making someone small feel smaller. She had seen the way she would linger just a moment too long, the way she would whisper sarcastic comments under her breath, knowing the old woman would hear them. The maid felt a knot in her stomach. She had worked in many homes before, and she had seen cruelty hidden behind polite smiles. She had seen the way rich people could take advantage of those they considered weak. But she had never witnessed anything like this level of calculated cruelty. And it hurt her because she could see how scared the mother was. One afternoon, the fiancée decided to go through the mother's room. She opened drawers without permission and moved small items around as if searching for something to criticize. "This is a mess," she muttered. "How do you live like this?" The mother looked at her hands, clenched together. I'm sorry," she whispered. "Sorry?" The fiancée said sharply, looking down her nose. "Sorry doesn't fix anything. You should be more careful. You should be more useful." The maid had been in the hallway, passing by, and heard every word. She paused, her hand gripping the broom tightly. She wanted to speak, to tell the fiancée to stop, to remind her that this woman had raised the billionaire with love and sacrifice. But she said nothing, because she knew that words alone might not be enough to protect the mother, and could make things worse. Still, the maid acted quietly. She would go into the room after the fiancée left and straighten things, move the small items back to their places, and reassure the mother with gentle words. "It's okay, ma'am," she would whisper. "Don't mind her." And for a moment, the mother's shoulders would relax, the tension easing slightly, because she knew she wasn't completely alone. The fiancée did not stop at words. She began to control the mother's movements and daily routines, insisting she eat only at certain times, rest only at certain times, and even sleep in rooms that were less comfortable. "This is for your own good," she would say, her tone falsely kind. But the mother felt the harshness behind it, the underlying message that she was inferior, unwanted, and powerless. One day, the fiancée asked the mother to move boxes from the storeroom to the main hallway. The boxes were heavy, and the mother's arms trembled as she lifted them. The fiancée stood nearby, her face calm, watching the mother struggle. "You can do it faster," she said, almost laughing. "I didn't think you were this weak." The mother's knees shook, and she nearly dropped one of the boxes. The fiancée's lips curled into a small smile, as if enjoying the fear and effort. The maid rushed forward, taking one box to lighten the load. "Let me help, ma'am," she said quietly, but the fiancée waved her off. "Stand back," the fiancée said, her voice sharp. "This is between us." The maid's heart ached. She stayed close, keeping a watchful eye, knowing that one misstep could harm the mother, who had no one else to defend her. Even in small moments, the fiancée's cruelty showed itself. She would interrupt conversations, mock the mother's words, and correct her tone in ways that seemed polite but carried sharp judgment. She would touch things carelessly, leave crumbs on the floor, spill water intentionally, and blame the mother for every little accident. At night, the mother would sit alone in her room, her hands folded in her lap, and stare at the ceiling. She tried not to cry, tried to be brave, tried to remind herself that this was temporary, and her son would protect her. But every day, the weight of the fiancée's words and actions grew heavier, pressing on her heart. The maid, too, felt the weight. She had come to care for the mother as if she were family. Every harsh word the fiancé spoke cut her deeply. But she had learned patience. She had learned to watch, to understand, to plan. She knew that witnessing cruelty was not enough. She had to be ready to act when the time came. Then came the morning when the fiancé's words crossed the invisible line. She demanded the mother clean the floors herself, even though the maid had already done it earlier. The mother tried to protest gently, saying she wasn't strong enough. "Don't lie to me," the fiancé snapped. "You can do more than you think. Stop pretending." The mother's hand shook, her voice broke, and tears rolled down her cheeks. She felt small, unwanted, and humiliated. She looked at the maid, who knelt beside her, trying to offer comfort with a quiet hand on her arm. "You don't deserve this," the maid whispered softly, her voice trembling. "You've done nothing wrong." The fiancée noticed, and her eyes narrowed. She turned her sharp gaze on the maid, as if she were a threat. But the maid stayed calm, standing firmly beside the mother. For the first time, the fiancé realized that someone in the house would not bow to her cruelty. Days passed, and the pattern continued. The fiancé would smile in front of the billionaire, acting as though she were the loving partner, the caring future daughter-in-law. But when he was away, her true nature came out. She would control, criticize, and belittle. And the mother, weakened by age and fear, could not fight back alone. The maid continued to watch, to comfort, and to protect as best she could. She knew the billionaire had no idea what was happening. He believed his mother and fiancé got along. He believed his house was a place of love and peace. He had no idea that behind closed doors, cruelty and fear had taken root. One afternoon, the maid quietly cleaned the room, carefully putting everything in its place. The mother sat in her chair, trembling slightly. "Don't let it get to you," the maid whispered. "She cannot take your dignity from you." The mother nodded, her eyes full of tears. "I try," she said. "I really do." The maid looked at her and felt something stir deep inside, a resolve she had not felt before. She could no longer only watch. She could no longer only comfort. Something had to be done. But she had to wait for the right moment when her actions would matter the most. For now, she stayed vigilant. She stayed strong. And she stayed close to the mother, who had been alone for too long. The house looked calm on the outside, but inside, the tension was growing. And the maid knew that soon the truth could no longer be hidden. The day ended with a quiet hush over the mansion. The fiancé was upstairs, arranging clothes and planning her day. The mother sat quietly, exhausted and scared. And the maid, silent and watchful, prepared herself for the moment when kindness alone would not be enough and courage would be needed. The house seemed peaceful, but everyone inside knew that nothing would ever be the same again. When the billionaire was home, she acted caring toward his mother. She would ask polite questions, offer fake smiles, and gently touch the old woman's shoulder when others were watching. The mother always felt something cold behind those smiles, but she said nothing. She did not want to disturb her son's happiness. When he left the house, everything changed. The house grew quieter. The air felt heavier. The smiles disappeared. The fiancée spoke differently then. Her voice became sharp. Her words lost all kindness. She treated the mother like an unwanted guest, not like the woman who owned the house before anyone else. "Don't ring that bell so much," she would say. "You're not helpless." If food was late, the mother waited. If the room was cold, she stayed silent. If her medicine was missing, she searched for it slowly, her hands shaking. She told herself it was fine. She told herself it would get better. She told herself she was old and should not complain. There was one person who noticed everything. The maid had worked in the house for years. She came early and left late. She cleaned, cooked, washed, and listened. People rarely noticed her, but she noticed them. She saw how the mother's eyes lowered when the fiancé entered the room. She saw how the mother's hands trembled more each day. She heard the harsh words spoken when no one else was around. The maid was a black woman with a quiet voice and a tired body, but a strong heart. Life had taught her to endure, but also to care. She had lost her own mother years ago. Sometimes, when she looked at the old woman in the garden room, it felt like seeing a piece of her past. She wanted to speak up many times. Each time, fear stopped her. She needed the job. She sent money home. She knew how easily someone like her could be replaced. Still, her heart hurt every time she saw the mother treated with disrespect. One morning, as sunlight came through the windows, the maid brought breakfast to the mother's room. The old woman tried to sit up, but her body refused. The maid helped her gently, careful not to cause pain. "Thank you," the mother whispered, her voice weak. The maid smiled softly. "Take your time." As they spoke, loud footsteps came closer. The fiancée entered the room without knocking. Her face tightened when she saw the maid still there. Why is she still in bed? She snapped. She should be up already. The mother tried to speak, but the words stayed in her throat. The maid felt anger rise inside her chest, but she stayed calm. "She's not feeling well this morning." The fiancée rolled her eyes. "She's always not feeling well. This is not a hospital." The mother looked away, ashamed, even though she had done nothing wrong. The maid wanted to say more. She wanted to remind the woman whose house this really was. Instead, she lowered her head and stepped back. Later that day, the billionaire called from the office. He spoke happily about wedding plans and travel ideas. The fiancée laughed sweetly on the phone. The mother listened quietly from her chair, forcing a smile so her son would not worry. After the call ended, the room fell silent again. The mother's smile faded. She stared at the floor, her eyes wet. She did not cry out loud. She never did. The maid saw this too. That night, as the house slept, the maid sat alone in the staff room. Her hands shook slightly as she held a cup of tea. Her thoughts raced. She knew something was very wrong. She knew this could not continue. But she also knew speaking the truth could cost her everything. She thought about her own mother. She thought about respect. She thought about silence and how it can hurt just as much as cruelty. In the main bedroom upstairs, the fiancée slept peacefully, unaware or uncaring of the damage she caused during the day. Down the hall, the old mother lay awake, staring at the ceiling, praying quietly for strength. And somewhere between them stood the maid, trapped between fear and conscience, knowing deep inside that this house, so beautiful on the outside, was slowly breaking from within. This was only the beginning.